if anything, what I've learned is that adversity can propel you to opportunities that you might not have taken advantage of before. So, with that in mind, many of us are flocking to YouTube to establish our own platforms. And as much as we can diversify and also own our own content, that is important. The fact that we have a future president stating that he is interested in having state owned social media companies sets a precedent for that to happen everywhere. And if it isn't already happening with Twitter and Facebook, with these social media moguls kissing the ring of our future dictator. So it is what it is. And I guess the question is, what do we do with that information? Right? It's kind of like, I don't know, it's like if you were married to a serial killer and didn't know it and then found out, what do you do with that information? I was born into an America that I thought was progressing. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. What he didn't say is that you just kind of coast and it just goes there without any work. I'm a member of the loving generation. I was born at a time when miscegenation or Black and white people being married and having kids was illegal in many states. And out of that, there was a lot of enthusiasm and there was a lot of hope that integration would save us all. And we've seen recently that it isn't predetermined that justice will reign. Democracy is not guaranteed. Rights that we thought that we had won can be lost. And so the question is, now that we know what we know. Remember when Trump was elected, people were saying, oh, we'll just give him a chance, right? Or he doesn't really mean that, right? Now we know what we know, not just about the future president. We know what we know about the American people. We know that when they know they're voting for somebody who sexually assaults women, somebody that has been involved in an insurrection, spreading misinformation, right? When we know that as a country, we actually think that is a successful electoral strategy. My daughter brought up a really good point to me the other day that this idea that Democrats, quote, ran a bad campaign. What we're saying when we say that is that the Trump campaign was a good campaign, demonizing immigrants and calling whole communities, whole subsets of the American family, calling Puerto Rico a dump, a garbage heap in the middle of the ocean, characterizing Haitians as savages for eating people's pets. All of these lies and even just rambling in incoherent sentences about sharks and batteries and literally word salad, that is a successful presidential strategy, is basically what we're hearing. Just- So, with that in mind, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do about our engagement on social media? Where do we talk about these things? How do we protect our communities? The way that we have organized in the past, it does not exist anymore. The social media companies have lulled us online and we don't even, I mean, do you even have a phone book? In the old days, we used to have phone books where we would keep all of our contacts and you would call your friends on the phone regularly. I don't even know the phone numbers of many of my friends. And there are so many people that I'm in regular contact with through these apps, right? They're private apps that are now associated with a fascist dictator elect. And what do we do with that information? What I'm thinking is that we need to go old school. We need to go Y1K. We don't even own the books that we think we own. So we need to go back to the old school ways. We need to buy our own records. We need to buy our own books. We need to start writing zines. We need to meet with people in person, in community, call up our friends on the phone. And we need to stop talking so publicly about our plans because they are monitoring us. This isn't just about our data being monetized. This is about surveillance. This is about control. And potentially, this is about a rise towards fascist control of not just our media like conversations, but our actual conversations that we're having online. Because when TikTok shut down, the conversation stopped. And there are people that I would never have talked to again. That's a wake up call, right? And so the question I'm asking is, what do we do with this information? Because now we can't say that we don't know or wait and see. We know, we know, we know. And so, what are you doing with that information? What do you think we should be doing with that information? In the meantime, I'm diversifying all of my social media channels and I'm preparing to get off of many of them. I'm setting up my own Patreon so we can have conversations on our own platforms. I'm signing up to support other content creators on their Patreon channels. And I also want to say we need to support the people who were calling this out several years ago. Many of them were Black women like me who were calling this stuff out because we were being targeted first. If you are supporting the efforts of people to resist, you should be giving your money to Black women before you're giving money to white folks who are now just realizing that this is a problem. So, anyway, follow me on Patreon at Just Talks Podcast, but also follow other content creators that are creating community offline in order to have these conversations in safe ways and find ways to maintain and build our communities in ways that we're not vulnerable. And in the meantime, I will be putting more content on YouTube. I will be doing more video essays. I'm going to be starting up the podcast again. If you want to support this work, join my Patreon. It is free. I will be sharing content there. I will also be holding community space there for us to have these conversations. Also, fund my work so that I can continue to produce content and elevate the work through the podcast. I can elevate the work of other folks who are at the forefront of the resistance. Oh, and one last thing. One of the things that I think we can all be doing is the opposite of what we've been doing, which is reading online. I think about all the time that I've spent online producing content. That is also time that I could have spent writing a book or reading books. And so I'm going back to the old school and I'm reading paper books. And this one called March, I was lucky enough to meet Representative John Lewis when he produced this book. This is the story of John Lewis, but it's also the story of MLK and the civil rights movement, which has never ended. I think we need to start learning from previous generations who organized, who were infiltrated by the government, by white supremacist organizations, were threatened, right? We need to listen and learn to folks who've been there before. This is not the first time that we are facing this. What do they say? History may not repeat itself, but it rhymes. And it is definitely rhyming right now. And anyone who wants to resist where we're going needs to understand how we got here and where we've been. So, with that, wishing you much love. Happy MLK Day. Take care of yourself and your community, and encourage your friends to join me on Patreon and join me on the platforms that I'm currently on. You can find all of my social media platforms on AllieMCollins.com. I look forward to staying in community with you on whatever platforms we're on.